Welcome to this deep dive titled Evolution by the Numbers, Tracking Traits Through Time. We are so glad you are joining us today.
Yeah, we've got a really great one for you.
We absolutely do. Our mission today is to answer a really fascinating driving question, which is, how can numbers and math reveal evolutionary changes that, might be completely invisible if we were only observing a few individual organisms?
Right, because observing just a few organisms can be, well, pretty misleading.
Exactly. And to figure this out, we're pulling from some fantastic sources today. We've got middle school science frameworks, historical ecological investigations, and some really cool population simulation data.
All of which really highlight the math behind the biology.
Right, because, watching evolution without math is it's a lot like trying to guess the final score of a basketball game by only watching one player for 30 seconds.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
You might see them make a spectacular game-winning three-pointer.
Yeah.
Or you might see them just trip completely over their own shoelaces.
Right.
But without looking at the whole scoreboard over the entire game, you have absolutely no idea which team is actually winning. You need the whole scoreboard.
You really do. To truly see that scoreboard in biology, you have to look at the statistical distributions. You rely on mathematical representations like counts, fractions, ratios, and percentages. Those are what define an entire population. Because as you pointed out with that basketball analogy, an individual organism's story is really just an anecdote.
Right, it's just one data point.
Exactly. A single animal surviving a harsh winter or, dying from a predator could just be dumb luck.
Yeah.
But when you zoom out and you look at the mathematical trends over many generations, you start to see natural selection acting as this massive filter.
Okay, but before we can track how those numbers change, we have to establish what we're actually counting, right?
Right.
Because you can't track a mathematical shift in a population if every single animal is just a perfect identical clone of the one sitting next to it.
No, absolutely not. And that brings us to the absolute baseline of all evolutionary math, which is variation.
Variation.
Yes. Within any population in the wild, individuals vary. They have different physical traits like color or size, and they have different behavioral quirks too, like speed or foraging habits.
Oh, sure.
And crucially, a lot of those differences are inherited. They are passed down genetically from their parents.
Okay, so that built-in genetic variation is like the raw material.
Exactly. It's the pre-existing deck of cards that the environment is going to shuffle and filter.
Okay, so let's look at an example from the sources. Imagine walking into the boreal forest, say, 100 years ago.
Okay, setting the scene.
Yeah, we have this historical ecological data on a population of snowshoe hares. And in this specific snapshot, the starting trait distribution is perfectly split.
50-50.
Right, a 50-50 ratio. Half the hares have a genetic trait for a white coat, and half have a genetic trait for a brown coat. Now, in a historical autumn, the snow falls on time, and you get this pure white background.
Which is perfect for the white hares.
Exactly. Against that snow, the white hares are completely camouflaged. The brown hares, on the other hand, are highly visible to predators, like the lynx. So the numbers dictate that the lynx is going to catch a significantly higher fraction of brown hares.
Right, because the environmental conditions make some traits more helpful than others. In that white environment, the pressure makes the white trait incredibly helpful.
But natural environments are dynamic, they change.
They do.
So let's say the climate shifts. You get an early snowmelt, or maybe the snow just arrives much later in the season. Suddenly, the environmental condition is completely different. The background is brown soil, bare branches, dead leaves.
And now the exact same white hairs stick out like sore thumbs.
Right. But wait, this is where so many people, including me sometimes, get tripped up.
Oh, the mutation question.
Yes. If the snow melts and the background is completely brown, doesn't the white hare's body, realize it's in danger? Won't the white hairs just mutate and turn brown because they literally need to hide from the lynx?
Yeah. That is the trap we all fall into. Because human beings are conscious problem solvers.
Right. We see a problem, we fix it.
Exactly. We think, I'm cold, I will put on a jacket. And we project that same intentionality onto evolution. But natural selection has no intentions.
It's just a mechanism.
Right. Mutations, the actual chemical changes in the DNA that create new traits, those are entirely random. They're accidents. An individual animal cannot consciously direct its DNA to mutate just because its environment changed.
So a hare can't just wish itself a brown coat?
Not at all. For a population to adapt to a new environment, the adaptive trait either has to arise completely by random chance Or, much more commonly, it already exists in the population's genetic variation.
The deck of cards you mentioned earlier.
Yes, the environment doesn't invent the trait, it simply applies the pressure. If the brown trait didn't already exist in that hare population when the snow melted, the lynx would just eat all the white hares, and the local population would likely just face extinction.
Wow. So the math relies entirely on what genetic cards are already in the deck.
Exactly. Environmental conditions just dictate which of those cards are currently winning hands.
Which brings us to extreme environmental shifts and how those shifts translate into numbers over time. There's a really great simulation in the data we're looking at featuring a fictional animal.
Oh, the australope.
Yes, the australope. It's this perfect model for tracking how a population handles a massive temperature drop. So we start with a population of australopes living in a really warm tropical climate.
Okay.
And if you look at their starting trait distribution, almost every single individual has very low fur levels, like levels 1 or 2. They are basically wearing light windbreakers.
And in a warm environment, that low fur trait is completely sufficient.
Right. But then the simulation abruptly changes the environmental condition. The ecosystem goes from warm to freezing.
Which means the differences in survival are going to be drastic.
Oh, yeah. The mortality rate skyrockets. The vast majority of those low-fur australopes are just going to shiver and die. But because of that underlying genetic variation we talked about, there are a few rare australopes in the population with a high fur trait.
Right, they basically have thick winter parkas.
Exactly. Now, I want to push back on the math here for a second, specifically the idea of probability.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because probability feels so abstract, you know? It's kind of like rolling loaded dice. Just because an australope has thick fur doesn't give it an invincible magical force field.
Oh, definitely not.
Like, it could survive the freezing temperatures and then immediately fall off a cliff. Probability doesn't guarantee a single individual's outcome, does it?
No, the loaded dice analogy is spot on. Having an adaptive trait is never a guarantee of survival. A thick-furred australope could absolutely fall off a cliff. It could catch a disease.
Or get eaten.
Or just have terrible luck and fail to find a mate. And on the flip side, a thin-furred australope might, I don't know, stumble into a geothermal cave, stay perfectly warm, and survive the freeze against all odds.
So individual survival in the wild is just incredibly noisy.
It's full of chaos and random chance. But when you roll those loaded dice 10,000 times across a whole population, the chaos cancels itself out.
Oh, I
That thin-furred australope surviving in a hot spring, that's a 1 in a million fluke. But the thick-furred australope surviving the cold, that is a biological reality.
Right.
Over the entire population, the organisms with the adaptive traits win the survival lottery more consistently. They have a greater probability of surviving and reproducing.
And because they reproduce more, the proportion of the population carrying that thick fur trait increases generation after generation.
Exactly. When this repeats over generations, the fraction of individuals with particular traits changes drastically.
And this highlights a concept that is so hard to internalize, I think. One individual does not evolve.
No, never.
A single australope does not evolve thick fur during its lifetime. It just lives or dies. The population evolves over generations as the mathematical proportions of those traits shift.
Precisely. The shift from individual lifespan to generational time is where the math really shines. A trend in a population can be very clear even when individual outcomes vary.
Right.
Like a 5% survival advantage for thick fur might not look like much in year 1, but if you compound that 5% advantage over 50 generations, the distribution after several generations completely transformed.
The high fur trait goes from being this statistical anomaly to being the dominant characteristic of the species.
Yes, and scientists use data to track those very changes.
Which brings us perfectly to our next section. Because to truly see these proportions change, scientists don't just rely on raw counts, right? They visualize the data.
They absolutely do.
So it's time for a dedicated Read the Graph segment.
Oh, I love these.
Let's visualize a specific mathematical representation from the sources. A histogram of rough-skinned newt poison levels.
Okay, so a histogram is a type of bar graph that shows the frequency of data in intervals. Let's break it down.
Right. First, what are the variables on each axis?
So on the x-axis, the horizontal one, we have the range of possible traits. In this case, the variation in toxin levels scaled from poison level 1 through 10.
Okay. And the y-axis?
The y-axis, the vertical one, shows the frequency. That's the number of individual newts that have that specific poison level.
Got it. And the values here on the y-axis, are they just counts?
They are counts of individuals, yes, which can also easily be expressed as proportions or percentages of the total population.
Okay, so let's look at the direction of change. Let's do a before and after trait distribution. At generation 1, the starting distribution, the vast majority of the population is sitting at the low end of the spectrum.
Right. The highest frequency of newts is at level 1 or 2. They're barely toxic.
But then we slide the generation slider forward. We go from generation 1 to generation 50, and we watch the bars for poison level 1 and 2 just shrink and essentially disappear.
While simultaneously, the bars for the high poison levels 8, 9, and 10, those grow taller and taller.
So by generation 50, the highly poisonous trait isn't just present, it has become the most common trait.
Yes.
Now, what does this graph actually support?
Well, the data supports the explanation that an environmental pressure caused the highly poisonous trait to increase in the population over time.
Right. But, and this is key, what can the graph not prove by itself?
Yeah.
Because there is a massive blind spot here, right?
Yeah.
The graph proves that the newts got more poisonous, but a graph alone cannot prove why it happened.
Exactly. There's no column on that histogram labeled garter snake predation.
Right.
That is the boundary between statistical data and field ecology. The graph confirms the evolutionary trend, but you need the ecological context to identify the specific environmental cause.
You need the field biologists out in the mud to observe that the garter snakes are the ones eating the toxic newts and driving that selection pressure.
Exactly. The math gives you the what, and the ecologists give you the why.
Now, our new histogram showed a steady, relentless, one-way increase in a trait. They just got more and more poisonous over time. But environments aren't always static like that.
None at all.
What happens to the numbers when the environment itself goes back and forth? Like a pendulum.
Oh, the population bounces right along with it.
Yeah.
And we have incredible, decades-long data sets proving this.
Oh, you're talking about the Daphne major finches.
Yes. It's a real-world example set on a tiny, rugged, volcanic island in the Galapagos. Scientists have been meticulously tracking finch populations there year after year.
And the specific trait they are comparing is beak depth, right?
Right, how thick and robust a bird's beak is.
Yeah.
And the starting distribution shows a wide variation of beak depths, from thin to really thick.
And the environmental condition on this island is basically a metronome dictated by rainfall.
Exactly.
In a wet year, the island flourishes. It produces millions of small, soft seeds. But when a severe drought year hits, those soft seeds just completely vanish. The only food sources left are these massive, tough-shelled seeds.
And the differences in survival become incredibly clear. During a drought, the finches with thin, tweezer-like beaks physically cannot crack the only remaining food source.
So they starve.
Unfortunately, yes. But the finches with thick, robust beaks, they can crack them. So they survive, they reproduce. And within just 1 or 2 generations, if you look at a line graph of the average trait value, it shifts dramatically upward.
The thick beak becomes the dominant trait.
Yes.
But then the pendulum swings back, right? The drought ends, torrential rains return, and suddenly the island is covered in tiny, soft seeds again.
And the pressure reverses.
Right. Having a massive, heavy beak actually becomes a liability. It takes way more energy to use when you're just trying to pick up tiny seeds. The birds with the smaller beaks can gather food far more efficiently now.
And the math immediately reflects that. The proportion of small beaks surges. So a line graph of average beak size over time doesn't look like a steady climb up a mountain.
No, it zigzags.
Exactly. It perfectly mirrors the climate data.
I really love this example because it completely destroys this really common misconception about evolution.
Which one?
People talk about evolution like it's a ladder. Like these animals are constantly upgrading until they eventually unlock the ultimate perfect beak.
Oh, right.
But it's not a ladder. It's more like a wardrobe. A heavy winter coat isn't objectively better than a t-shirt. It just depends on what the weather is doing outside.
That is a perfect analogy. A trait is adaptive only in relation to a particular environment. The concept of an ultimate trait is completely a myth.
Yeah.
And what's mathematically fascinating is that even during a long drought, the genes for small beaks don't always vanish entirely.
Right. They just become mathematically rare.
Yes, they sit in the population's gene pool like an ecological insurance policy, waiting for the environment to change again.
Okay, so we've talked about loaded dice and shifting environments and trait distributions bouncing back and forth. But if you are listening to this and thinking critically about the numbers, you might be asking, how do we know we aren't just seeing a fluke?
That is the big question.
Right. Like if I flip a coin twice and I get heads both times, I can't write a scientific paper claiming that coins universally land on heads.
No, you definitely cannot.
I have to flip that coin 1,000 times for the math to drown out my own luck and reveal the true 50-50 ratio.
Mhm.
So to see these real evolutionary trends, we need massive sample sizes, right?
We absolutely do. Sample size matters immensely.
Mm.
And this brings us to the law of large numbers.
Okay.
Scientists need data from whole populations rather than just one traumatic example, because you cannot rely on isolated anecdotes.
Right, like finding one single thin-beaked finch that somehow survived the drought.
Exactly. Maybe it found a hidden cache of soft seeds in a crevice. If you only look at that one lucky bird, you would falsely conclude that beak size doesn't matter.
You can't just point to the anomaly and say, look, natural selection is a lie.
Right. But when you sample thousands of birds, that one lucky finch becomes a statistical blip. The overarching trend becomes undeniable.
But scientists can't catch every single bird on an island, can they?
Usually no. That's why ecologists use sampling. They meticulously count individuals in a small representative area, and then they use proportional math, multiplying those numbers to estimate the total population size.
Oh, so the data tables, the percentages, the probability statements, they cut through the noise of individual luck.
Exactly. They filter out the anomalies so we can see the massive generational gears of natural selection actually turning.
Which allows us to step back from watching that single basketball player and finally read the entire scoreboard.
Exactly.
Well, let's summarize the incredible journey we've been on today.
Sounds good.
We started by looking at how populations have built-in genetic variation and how the environment acts as this relentless filter.
Right, making some traits a deadly liability and others a lifesaver.
We explored how probability favors the organisms with adaptive traits, leading them to survive and reproduce more over generations.
Yes.
We used histograms to see how the frequency of traits, like poison levels in newts, can completely rewrite a population's biology.
And we looked at the pendulum of the finch beaks to understand that an adaptive trait is only helpful relative to a specific environment.
Exactly. By using these mathematical representations, fractions, proportions, bar graphs, and line graphs, we can track exactly how environmental pressures mold the distribution of traits in a population over time. The math makes the invisible visible.
It really does.
Which brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with, something for you to mull over after this deep dive ends.
You can lay it on us.
Well, we have talked a lot about snow melting early in historical forests and remote volcanic islands drying up, but human beings are changing environments all over the globe right this second.
We certainly are.
We are altering temperatures, we are bringing in invasive species, we are paving over complex habitats to build cities. So if the environment is the filter, what hidden mathematical shifts in traits are happening in the populations of animals living right in your own backyard?
Oh, wow.
What evolutionary scoreboards are ticking away right now, completely unseen, just waiting for us to graph them?
Natural selection leaves a trail. Sometimes that trail is made of bones or genes. Sometimes it is made of numbers.